another episode of the Young Terps podcast. Ahmed Gafir and Mason Viner. We're talking Terps, Charlotte on Saturday. The Terps getting the bright lights, 7:30 on NBC, and of course at CQ Stadium, where hopefully we'll see some parts of the Terps' new game day experience. Ahmed, Charlotte, a lot of familiar faces and some bad blood with Maryland.
Yeah, I definitely expect it to be a chippy game on Saturday. Obviously, I believe it's 6 former Terps: Austin Fontaine, Ja'Kai Green, Zion Shockley, T.J. Butler, Isaiah Hazel. All those guys are now with Charlotte. Mike Miller, Jerry Prutos. But those guys were obviously coaches, analysts last year, who are now with the Charlotte program. And then St. Francis' defensive line coach is also D-line coach over at Charlotte as well. So yeah, a lot of familiarity. Loxy talked about it today. Just the added layer that Mike Loxley's son Kai played under Biff at Gilman back in the day. So definitely will be some familiar faces. I'll be curious to see what the vibe is like after the game.
Yeah, Charlotte started off the season at home, a 24-3 win over South Carolina State, who's not really a great FCS program. And really, I think we'll see a lot of ground game going up against Maryland, and maybe an early test for the defensive line. Not really sure if you can call it a test when you're a 24-point favorite, but Terps certainly going to see Charlotte running the football a lot.
Yeah, I think kind of what's interesting, kind of coming off the heels of Towson, and Loxy talked about it. Maryland was kind of able to find some pressure on the edge, but the level pressure was kind of, the level blitzing was kind of something, an area of focus kind of going into week 2. And you saw Maryland, against Towson, the bulk of the Tigers rushing yards, like Loxy said, came against, QB scrambles, things like that. So I think this weekend, obviously, I think on paper, I think Maryland's just sheer depth. I think that's what's going to be able to really outlast Charlotte over a 60-minute span. But when you think about Jelon Jones, what he's able to do in the pocket there with that dual threat threat there, he poses a significant challenge to Maryland in that front seven. And obviously, Charlotte's going to run the football. So they've got a couple of running backs, Teron Kelman, Darrell Robinson, but those guys, former St. Francis stars, who both really efficient on the ground. So I do think that it'll be a test for the front seven, just kind of gradual build up into conference play, and I think it'll be a chance for them to be just as dominant as they were against Towson.
Yeah, the thing that jumps off the stat sheet from their game for me was just seeing the quarterback with 10 carries, 63 yards on the ground. Obviously, he throws 2 interceptions in the game as well. But Maryland just has struggled against running quarterbacks. Talk about the contain on the edge. That's something that Locks pointed out post-game, them lacking that ability. So it does give them a chance to take a step forward in that area. They're certainly going to see quarterbacks like to get out of the pocket throughout the year. So it's a different look that they'll see. I'm sure if you didn't think you saw a lot from Maryland last weekend, I think we've seen just about nothing from Charlotte as far as what their game looked like against South Carolina State. So Biff's certainly going to try and pull out all the tricks. You're going to get the team's best shot. And I think that in itself is valuable to Maryland going forward this year, is they're truly going to get a team that's trying to make a splash, that's trying to make their way onto it with a guy that's coached so long in the state of Maryland, that's going to want to recruit the state of Maryland. You're going to see Charlotte's best game, or as far as early season best game that you'll get out of them. And that's just really, really valuable for a football team like Maryland to get challenged early, to get punched in the mouth and really see how they respond.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like I said, I expect it to kind of be a chippy game, obviously, just with the familiarity, and then just overall, just the amount of deep people that came from the DMV that are really just going to be on the same field together. I think it'll be that just some some interesting themes kind of throughout the day. But yeah, like you said, I think what Jelon Jones is able to do with the read option, I think that'll kind of test it. And then, on the other side of the ball, I think, Ayabi Anoma, Austin Fontaine, both those guys, they've been able to show flashes in the past that, they can make an impact in the trenches. Maryland offensive line, like we talked about, I think I did a breakdown of the offensive line. I believe it was 13 offensive linemen that saw the field on Saturday. Can't say that, I expect to really see 13 return to the field against Charlotte. I think it'll be a little bit more trim, maybe, 7, 8, maybe Maryland, continues to rotate if they're able to take care of business and jump out to a similar lead like they were against Towson. But, I definitely think that there are some, especially, like I said, obviously on both sides of the ball, I think that's where Maryland's kind of able to take those strides. And that's kind of where Maryland maybe has the most to gain out of this weekend.
Yeah, you talk about the Terps. For me, I agree with you on that. Just getting rhythm, getting your guys together, and continuing to build on what the good pieces from the Towson game were last week against a little bit better competition. For me, I mean, I'm looking at Maryland's passing game, keeping Leah off the ground, getting the ball out quick, continuing to do those things, and then really being able to take advantage of the deep ball, something we talked about in our post-game pod, where there was a couple of drops, a couple of off-time plays where it really looked like they had an opportunity. Can they get just that little bit better? Or in Loxley's case, I think he's looking for them to get a lot better, given that he said their biggest jump should be between game one and game two, or always is between game one and game two. For me, I'm looking for the little things. Do they pick up those edge rushers, the running backs a little bit more involved in the blocking game? When I went back and watched the tape, I really didn't like what I saw in their chips. The tight ends weren't very involved in any sort of pass pro. Can they kind of sharpen the pencil just that little bit much to be able to put up those points that I think you expect to see? And given that they're out between a 23.5 and 24.5 point favorite, certainly Vegas thinks they're going to be able to put up some numbers in this game. Hopefully it's a good show in College Park on Saturday night.
Yeah, I believe it was, Maryland, they struggled with drops. I believe it was 7 drops, 3 throwaways. I believe that's what Loxley said. Believe he finished 22 of 33 though, so can't remember what the 11th incompletion was attributed to. But yeah, like you said, the drops, a lot of those came 15, 20 yards downfield. I think the one everyone will remember is the deep ball for Ty Felton. And I think, he's a guy that he's been able to show flashes through the years. I think that was kind of a chance for, his first chance to kind of make that splash play. So I think those are kind of the things that, like you said, Maryland wants to be able to take that next step with. And then, Loxley talked about it today. And I think it's kind of, goes back to the offensive line, but just the interior protection. And I think that kind of just, like I said, just goes back to, we saw Corey Bullock playing center, Mike Purcell, Eric Harris, both those guys were alternating. Mike Purcell was the first 2 series, and Eric Harris. Then Purcell came for the last series of the first half, and then Eric Harris rotated back in midway through that series. So you saw a lot of that on Saturday. So I think just kind of with that unit kind of being able to gel together a little bit, and I expect to maybe see a little bit more cohesion up front to try and generate that chemistry going into Virginia next Friday night. But I think that's kind of where I want to see as well. And then defensively, I think just being able to kind of contain that read option quarterback and maybe limit those big plays on the ground. I think that's, what Maryland needs to be able to do. I think as long as they're able to kind of keep everything in front of them and kind of keep the Charlotte offense a little bit more horizontal, I think that'll definitely bode well for Maryland's chances on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm just going off of that point. I would like to see the receiver rotation cut down maybe a little bit more. Just if we're going to play that many guys at receiver, let them get out 1 or 2 series in a row. And of course, you can sub during situationally, but really let guys start to get some rhythm to them. I feel like a guy like Ty Felton will benefit from that. I think Octavian Smith, just some of those younger guys that really haven't gotten on the field a ton in a row, that have always been situational pieces that you're really expected to contribute a lot. Let them get touches, let them get warmed up and into playing against somebody else. That's what everybody always says. I can't wait to, get on the field and see some competition. Well, let them start to get some snaps and stack those. If you're only going to give them 20 snaps, let's let it be 15 in a row and then 5 around the game. Let's start to see that. I think that goes for the offensive lineman. You mentioned that center rotation. When you hear successful quarterbacks talk, they always talk about their centers. I think we have a successful quarterback, and I think we need to give him a center that's going to be out on the field all the time with him. I think that's just something that a lot of people that know football will tell you. You have to get that exchange down. We don't want to end up in spots like we've seen the last couple of seasons where they haven't had a strong player at that position, and suddenly we're in November and the ball's getting snapped over the quarterback's head because it's the guy's first snap of the game midway through the second quarter. It's just, again, the little things that are out there. And then defensively, you mentioned the read option quarterback. I'll spin it around to the defensive side of that, not over pursuing the quarterback, keeping contain on the outside, getting those guys in there at edge. And man, if there's a game, if you looked at what Donnell Brown did in that second half when he really got in there, I'm going to love watching him play on Saturday night, because this is the perfect offense for him to really come onto the scene against, get off the edge, pin down, and use his frame, and his skill set is perfect to stop a read option quarterback. And man, I think Maryland really has a gem in him if he can get it going.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought, Mike Harris was another guy, in his first career action as a Terp. I thought he was another guy that looked really good in the second half as well. And I believe he finished with 15 snaps, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I think, like you said, just kind of being able to stay disciplined and stay within your assignment. And then, yeah, I think, just from a, another perspective, I think we've heard a lot about through this off season, how the locker room has developed, how the chemistry and the player led culture, it's there. And I think a lot of fans, I've said it before, but I think a lot of fans maybe overlook that stuff and they think maybe it's just coach speak. But I think a lot of that kind of is attributed to just the culture and the improved culture, I should actually clarify, that you've continued to see from year one to year three to now. But I think a big part of that is kind of staying disciplined. And I think, like we said, I expect to see some chippiness. Wouldn't be surprised if we see some blocks finished well past the whistle. So I think Maryland being able to stay composed, and I think we've seen strides over the last year, last season, and obviously this past week as well. Maryland did a really good job with penalties against Towson, but just like keeping the composure, I think that'll kind of be another aspect for Maryland fans to really see what kind of team it is.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think that if you looked at what shot Maryland in the foot the most, if that's the phrase you want to use for it, last year it had to be those penalties at just really, really poor times in games. This is going to be a team that, yeah, it's going to get up in your face. They're going to try and do everything you can to knock you off your game. I think coming out of that locker room, Charlotte knows that talent wise, they don't stack up well in this game. So it's, can you get in Maryland's head? Can you knock Maryland off their game and then make a couple big plays early to give yourself a chance into the late second quarter or into halftime where that you can almost make the other team scared. That's how a lot of teams at that level, when they're trying to make that big splash, do it. They come out, they get you off your game early, they put up a couple points, and suddenly before you know it, it's 14-3, and you're in a position to make a mistake that can really put you behind in the game. Ahmed, looking at something that a lot of Terp fans are concerned about, what does the injury report look like for this week? Who's in and who's out of practice today?
Yeah, Gotti Yedzi, that was a good sign to see. We hadn't seen in the last couple open portions of practice. Obviously, he missed the season opener, but he was out there today at practice. So that was obviously good to see. Talia Tagovailoa, he was back at practice, and I think that was a really kind of interesting injury because I think from the press box, a lot of people saw him go into the medical tent, saw him come back out, and then at that point, I think when he came out of the game officially, it was 35-6, 3 minutes up in the third quarter. So it didn't really seem like there was too much concern. He was available post game, didn't seem to be injured too much, but I think with the broadcast crew, I think there was, and just Leah looking like he had some injury in his left arm there, or left hand maybe. Looked like there might have been some concern, but no concerns there. Talia said he felt great, and Loxley, kind of talked about, it's football. He took some hits, but he was back at practice. No real concerns there. And I continue to hear that there was no concern regarding injury when he came out of the game on Saturday. So I think that bodes well. But obviously, him taking those hits, I think, especially when fans are kind of looking at the offensive line, I think fans are just going to be mindful of how many times he goes down. But nonetheless, going into week two, he looks good. And then Gavin Gibson, I saw him back at practice today. He went down after the second scrimmage of fall camp, so good. Maybe he is held out this upcoming weekend. Maybe he's listed as questionable. Wouldn't completely shock me, but trending towards being available potentially week three, but definitely by conference play.
Yeah, so a lot of good news on the injury front for the Terps. Ahmed, I guess I got to ask you this question. Maryland minus 23.5 on Saturday. Are you laying the points and taking the Terps?
Man, I thought about this because I think I saw it at minus. I think it opened at minus 25.5, and I do think that Maryland talent wise, I think that for over a 60-minute span, like I expect Maryland to go into halftime with a lead. Whether it's a 3-point lead, I could see that. I could definitely see Charlotte really unloading at the playbook. Like I said, they've been very confident. They've been pretty loud about it, and that hasn't really been a secret all off season. So I expect them to really leave it all out there. I think I think I'll take Maryland with the points. Just like I said, over a 60-minute span, I think Maryland will be able to at least generate at least a 3 touchdown lead. But I don't think that is a lock. So would be curious to see what the over is. I think last I saw 50.5. I think I'd be more comfortable probably taking the over than maybe Maryland with the points.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I go back to last year, and Maryland won that game 56-21, and it was over pretty soon after it started. But
Yeah.
the entire time while they won the game by that many scores, you never really felt like Maryland ever got it going. I kind of felt like that was a theme throughout all of last year. I would love for that to change on Saturday night. However, I love a team that's as feisty as Charlotte is coming into this. That's talking trash like they have been now for months. That has that relationship with players. I think this game will be personal for a lot of guys on the field on both sides, which I think will make it entertaining and definitely a watch-worthy game because the college football slate this Saturday is bad. It's ugly. Maryland Charlotte fits right in there with the primetime games that are on. So I would lean if I had to take Maryland with the points before I took Charlotte with the points, or take Maryland laying the points before I took Charlotte with the points. But the over, I think, is the play. If you're into gambling, Maryland's certainly going to put up some numbers. I wouldn't count Charlotte out to get to that 21 or 28 point mark in this game. And, there's a reason why they play the game, and that's because trash talk doesn't win on the field. And I think the Terps are definitely walking away with the win.
Yeah, like I said, and I completely agree with that. I think John Jones, I mean, like we said, they did a good job just kind of keeping it vanilla. He finished 13 of 19 for 125 yards. Did throw a pair of picks against one touchdown, but they have a lot of running backs that they can kind of lean on. And like we said, I think that there's Maryland's defense will get tested. They'll get some good looks. I mean, Darrell Robinson, if you were on Inside the Black Gold, like I was really high on him. I saw flashes of him senior year. I thought he was really good. So I mean, Maryland's going to face some talent this weekend. I think it's a good week too, going into UVA next Friday. But yeah, I think I do expect Maryland to move to 2-0, and when all said and done, it'll be really interesting to see what Biff's comments were after apparently he did not meet with the media this week. So we shall see.
Yeah, I think that post game presser might be the one to go to after this. He's definitely an entertaining guy. He gets his brand out there. There's nothing that challenges that. He has his brand, his followers, and he does his thing. And we'll see if it's successful in the college football world.
Yeah, I just have a feeling one way or the other we're gonna get some golden quote. So late Saturday night will be fun.
Yeah, and speaking of late Saturday night, we'll be doing our post-game pod right after Coach Loxley talks to the media. Again, make sure to check that out on Saturday. All the coverage on Inside the Black and Gold with Ahmed. And as always, if you like the show, give it a like, comment, review, wherever you consume the podcast. All that stuff helps us out. And as always, thanks for watching.